I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting it to take quite this long, but we have managed to go live. The thing I had uh, going on earlier is now concluded. So I could be here about an hour late. So happy that any of you decided to stick with me and wait it out. We'll take advantage of the time that we have left to us. So I've dropped the link in the StreamYard chat, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and take this opportunity to ping Jacob's server. But I literally turned my entire computer on 2 minutes ago, so all of this is coming at me as it comes. So here we are, another Monday night, and yeah, I guess something that I've been ruminating on is a conversation that Dr. Peterson had with some fellows from the um, Word on Fire Institute, like 3 or 4 years ago. Um, that was it was a really frustrating conversation to watch in certain points, and uh, so I'm just pinging Jacob's server right now, as I'm want to do. We'll see if that gets us a little more action here. Um, It was a really frustrating conversation to watch between Dr. Peterson and these two Word on Fire guys. And one of the most frustrating parts of the conversation was a conversation that they had about the status of the universe if God hadn't created any conscious human beings to inhabit it. Um, and there was just a total miscommunication there. And it seems like that would be an odd thing to have a miscommunication about. You're just trying to do a regular old thought experiment about about the universe and what would the universe be like. And thought experiments happen all the time. Albert Einstein was famous for his thought experiments. Imagine that somebody's on a train moving the speed of light, and another person's at the station, and the person on the train's flashing a light. What does the person at the station see as the train goes by? He used all these different thought experiments. And so, thought experiments, you know, they should just be like a regular old tool for figuring things out. And the Dr. Peterson and these Word on Fire guys got into this position where they were doing a thought experiment about what the world would be like if there were no people in it, and it's like they asked Dr. Peterson to divide by zero. He just couldn't compute that, and I think there's a reason for that. When we take Albert Einstein's thought experiments that get us to special relativity or whatever, you're still looking at that thought experiment as if you were a human being. Imagine you're in a train moving at the speed of light. Even if we don't know what moving at the speed of light would be like, because it's impossible for anything made out of solid matter, as far as I can tell. We can imagine being in a train doing that, and we can imagine what it's like to be at the station watching that train go by, and you get rid of all of the pesky drag and the inability to accelerate that quickly. There's still a human frame of reference inside of that universe. Now, when you try and do a thought experiment where there's no human beings in the entire universe, that's actually an impossible thought experiment. Because the second you start trying to imagine what that universe would be like, but boom, you have a human being inside that universe. You now have a human being inside that universe. And so it's no longer a universe without any human beings in it. And so, what would a universe without any human beings be like? It's impossible for us to know, but God could know that. And perhaps angelic intellects could know that. And maybe that's a good enough answer right there. And so, that was the answer that the two Word on Fire guys went to, but they got there awfully quickly. They didn't work their way through there like I just did. And so that might help account for the miscommunication. But anyway, since we're starting late, I'll stop blabbing and I'll let Mr. Andrew, Jacob, and how you doing, Jacob? A little bit.
I am doing well. I have recently been, I can't stay long, but I have recently been talking with a Catholic apologist, I introduced you to him on my Discord.
Mhm.
And first, I wanted the additional people who've recently joined my channel to realize that Father Eric is our is my official I have designated him as the representative of the Roman Catholic Church on my channel and on my Discord.
And you have the authority to do that on your channel and your Discord. So
Correct.
that's all good. Yeah.
Correct. And so I included the link in the description to his channel. You guys should go and watch this stream on Father Eric's channel, and you should subscribe to him. That was the first thing. The second thing, the moment you you announced you were going online, I got Michael Sartori on Twitter sent me a link to this discussion, and I'm going to put it into the private chat so you can take a look at it, Father Eric.
Okay.
But I thought I would give you an opportunity. I have no idea who this person giving the class is, but he called out your boy, Thomas Aquinas, in this long Twitter thread. And I wanted saying that Maimonides is a better scholastic than Thomas Aquinas, and I wanted to give you a chance to defend your boy there.
Oh, gosh. I don't have a Twitter account. And I don't have a Twitter account specifically to restrain me from taking swings at strangers over the internet. Discord's bad enough. Got into it last week with somebody on Discord. It worked out fine. It was just yeah. So maybe if this person who thinks that Maimonides, who is a respectable, serious thinker, don't mind him being mentioned in the same sentence with Aquinas. If he shows up on my stream, I'll talk to him. How about that?
Well, the thing with this Ryan Hurd, whoever he is apparently he's a Christian saying this. That's the surprising part. Like, I figured, and the point he makes is, which I don't know how. So I haven't studied the Guide to the Perplexed. I have no inclination towards the Guide to the Perplexed. It's a philosophical work, but he makes a point of Aquinas was using the Vulgate, and he gives an example of the word rock in the Bible. And he says, rock, e.g., for Maimonides in Hebrew, does not mean only rock, but also mountain. Saying that God is rock for Thomas can only mean that he supports as rocks do houses. Whereas for Maimonides, it can also mean that he shelters as mountains do the vulnerable. Multiply this example across the board, and you have extremely different readings of Holy Scripture because you have fundamentally different texts, which is like ultimately what I always talk about.
Yeah. Well, that sure could get interesting, huh?
Yep.
Sandy's asking, we're having a Monday night stream. I've been doing my streams on Mondays for like a month now, and that's going to be normal now because, okay, the next couple of weeks are actually be kind of crazy, but most Mondays work better than this. So you should expect to see it. The Sundays were just not working the way they did previously. So So yeah, do you have a good Thanksgiving?
I had a nice Thanksgiving. It was kind of an abnormal Thanksgiving. My sister was invited to her in-laws, and
Mm.
we, for the past 20 years, have been going to the same cousin every Thanksgiving. And that cousin was out of town, so it was just me and my parents. So we just went to a restaurant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it was nice, but it was just the three of us.
Okay. Well, that'll keep things quiet and predictable at least.
How was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. It was good. It was quieter than normal. Two of my brothers were either working or on call, and usually around the major holidays, my parents' house turns into the island of misfit toys. People who just don't have anywhere else to be, and there wasn't any of that this year. So just kind of Father Cody, who would almost always come, is unfortunately in the nursing home in a wheelchair, and we couldn't accommodate him. He's 87 years old and likely to face judgment soon. So uh, yeah, I think he'll be favorably received, and I think if you met him, you'd agree with me. So
I generally have a lot of respect for people who make it to old age, and yeah, I mean, making it to an old age as a Catholic priest generally means a life of service, which uh, means he did better than I did.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, life of service is definitely that describes him. So unfortunately, I think my parents visited him in the morning on Thanksgiving, but he wasn't able to make it. And so anyway, it was still a good Thanksgiving, but just immediate family and my brother-in-law. So, and he got to see what we're like when we're playing cards together.
So, do you guys do turkey or ham?
On Thanksgiving, we do turkey.
Okay.
Christmas can alternate between turkey or ham, depending on how much my dad annoys my mom for turkey.
What about
Like,
Easter?
Easter's always ham.
that always kind of it's always strange to me, but yes, I think for most people I've spoken to, Easter, what was really interesting, what's the name of that guy, Richard Rowland,
Hmm.
um, for Pascha, he did a whole pig, right? Like he smoked a whole pig, and he
Hmm.
put a picture on Twitter where you could see like the pig with the head and everything, and he's like, "Happy Pascha, everyone!"
That's amazing. Yeah. So the trouble is that I'm a priest, so I'm busy on Easter, and my dad's a deacon, so he's busy on Easter. And
Mm.
my mom, when you're the deacon's wife, you tend to just get asked to do more things, and so she's the sacristan, right? Sets things up for mass. So we've just recently, ever since my dad's been ordained, like our Christmases have been very, very busy because it's like I'm not done with the Latin mass until like 11:30, 12 on Christmas Day, and that's after staying up to MC the midnight mass for the bishop. So I'm pretty
Okay.
wiped out. As for
Wow.
my mom asked for help with sides this year, so I'm going to have mashed potatoes stashed in her fridge, ready to go in the slow cooker, so we just don't have to worry about that day of.
So, I guess, I mean, you always need a deacon for mass, correct?
That's not the case in the Roman Rite.
Okay.
In other rites of the church, they may have a different discipline. Deacons are just kind of a fun add-on in the Roman Rite. So
But I'm guessing, I mean, on Christmas, you really want a deacon, right? Because
yeah, I mean, so it's like, okay, we ordained you a deacon, so like get to work. So
Mhm.
that's part of it, and then it's also like they, if they're really good, they know where things are in the sacristy. They can deal with the altar servers if there's something going on, right? Because like I remember I was still a seminarian and I was serving like the 10 a.m. Christmas mass at my parish, and I was with a bunch of younger altar servers, and one of them got sick, and it's like it's just kind of nice to have another adult up there that could just take care of these things while you worry about praying. So
Okay, so it isn't like there's anything or any role that specifically you need a deacon for.
sure. So if you don't have a deacon, the roles that they would do would be divided up between the priest and another minister,
Okay. Okay, so I was
depending on what it
wondering,
is.
like administering communion. I figured like maybe you need to have a deacon or something like that. No.
Well, in the past 50 years in the Latin Church, we've greatly expanded the use of extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion,
Okay.
unordained layfolk. And that is, well, the jury's still out on whether or not that's a good idea. We'll just say it that way.
It sounds like you think it might not be the best idea.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, there's certain situations where I do think it's justifiable, but like, if you're doing it every Sunday, are they really extraordinary ministers anymore?
Right. If you're going to say that the Latin Mass isn't being extraordinary enough and cut down on it, like let's keep our extraordinary straight here.
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
women be extraordinary ministers? Okay.
yeah, yeah. So what you get in a lot of parishes is you get 6 or 8 women stomping up into the sacristy around communion time,
Mm.
which is very modern. Just say it that way.
Well, okay. So I was actually going to ask you about deaconesses because apparently the word deaconess does show up in the in the Gospels. No, it would be in Acts or something.
Yeah, yeah. It's in the letters of Saint Paul. I think it's in First or Second Timothy.
Okay. And
Um,
so, what exactly? Like, I asked Father Stephen about deaconesses, and he said it's kind of like they still do ordain deaconesses, but it's kind of like a nun position.
Yeah, yeah, it's the historical record is very sparse on it in terms of written sources. And by the time you get to like the 4th and 5th centuries, it doesn't seem like people are really picking up the ball and carrying that on. The most commonly repeated theory I've heard is that there was a time when baptisms were done in your birthday suit, or at least in certain places, that's the way it was done. And they didn't think having male clergy assisting the women, to get dressed after these things or before these things would be particularly relevant. So that would be a job given to the deaconesses. But it doesn't seem like anywhere in the church it was ever considered to be um, the same ordination that the male deacons would get.
Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that anything like a woman's role may correspond to a man's role, but it will never be the same, I believe. But yeah, so as far as baptism, though, you don't actually require someone ordained for baptism. If I'm
No, no, they're priests, deacons are the ordinary ministers, but in an extraordinary circumstance, anybody can validly baptize. So, yeah, it looks like Sally Joe's coming in with something. Men need to see men leading in the church. At the point, I really wish men would even clean the church. So that's Baptists in the middle of nowhere, South Dakota. That's what they're thinking. Yeah. So yeah, yeah. That's I don't really see any pathway forward to deaconesses in the century that I'm in the Catholic Church, and it seems like Pope Francis is just trying to talk the issue to death. Um, so, and if you don't think like if all of the women in the parishes in Fargo decided that they didn't want to help Father out anymore, the whole operation would grind to a halt. So to act like women don't have any power in the church, it's like, um,
I mean, that's generally a silly idea. Like,
yeah,
what's the saying people said? The war of the sexes will never be won because there's too much fraternizing with the enemy. Uh, like this idea of a war of sexes, I just think it's just such a bad framing.
mhm. I mean, sometimes it's a war, but like there are long periods of peace and cooperation, it seems. So yeah, no, I don't think of it as a war, but we'll see. We'll see where the future goes.
Do you still have your canon law classes during? So you're doing your canon
Online
law?
classes, online. This is my last semester with more than 3 credits, and then it's just down to 3 credits, except for the 2 months in the summer I'm out in DC, where I get 12. That's
So do you have to like? Is there logging into class or is it
yeah. Zoom
asynchronous?
meetings, Zoom meetings. I had to write a paper, and it was 7 real pages, right? Because the professor insisted on endnotes rather than footnotes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like that was 7 real pages of writing rather than, oh, here I've got like 4 pages and then a bunch of random nonsense in the footnotes to fill up the rest. Uh, yeah, and I'll have to write a JCL thesis, so 40 or 50 pages usually.
What kind of thesis? Like you get to pick the topic?
Yeah.
Have you considered a topic yet, or you that's too
Going
far
to
away?
go with the reservation of the Blessed Sacrament outside of sacred spaces. Uh, when do we?
I have no idea what I know what those words mean. I have no
Okay,
idea what they're talking about.
so the Eucharist, right? Yeah, Blessed Sacrament, another name for that.
Yes.
Yeah, we reserve it in certain places,
What does that mean?
meaning we've got a ciborium full of the consecrated hosts.
Oh, you keep it like
Yeah,
gold reserves. Okay,
yeah.
I thought you were talking about denying people.
Oh, okay. You know
Yeah.
what? That's another way that word could be interpreted in English. So glad we got that
Yeah.
cleaned up. And then, yeah. And so when we're doing this outside of a sacred space, right, which is like built for it,
Okay.
how can we do it? Under what circumstances? What
Okay.
precedents do we have? Where are the boundaries on it? And there's not a whole lot written about it as far as I can tell. So, and I'd like to know because sometimes priests have ideas, other
Mm.
priests, obviously not me. Um, so it's like, okay, if you're doing a weekend men's retreat at a lake cabin, are you going to reserve the Blessed Sacrament there? Is that okay? That was
Mm.
actually the example that did in fact happen that prompted me to think about this. So, oh, it looks like Gideon, the Byzantine Scotus. I will be in DC this June. I'm out in Washington, DC for June and July. So you can find me on Discord, and I would love to meet a Byzantine Scotus in real life because I just don't know that many Scotists.
Um, oh, I was going to ask you. Okay, so after you conduct mass, there's extra
Oh,
hosts,
yeah.
right? And you reserve it. Like, so the next time you conduct mass, then you use whatever was extra.
Sure. So it's reserved for a few reasons. The original reason was to bring it to the sick who can't who
Oh, so
can't
you deliberately make extra.
yeah, you deliberately make extra. So you
Okay.
reserve it for the sick, and then you also reserve it so that people can pray in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament in between liturgies, and it consecrates and hollows the space. And it's like you don't have to sit there and worry about having exactly the right number of hosts. got something to do with it. And in case you didn't put enough out, you've got extra. However, the priest who's celebrating Mass and any concelebrating priests are supposed to receive the Blessed Sacrament consecrated at this Mass.
Okay.
Because we're the ones offering the sacrifice, we need to also consume it. That's the idea.
Okay. But you never end up like throwing anything away, right?
No, not throwing away.
Yeah.
Not discarding into the garbage or anything. There are ways to handle hosts that are regarded as unfit for human consumption in a respectful way, but no, not the garbage or to the birds or anything like that.
Okay.
DJ Hudgens asks, what's a Scottish? You just want to take one of those T's out and it becomes a Scotist. There you go. And that is a disciple of John Duns Scotus, a medieval philosopher, who I have some problems with, but he had an admirable devotion to Our Lady. So I won't. Yeah.
Ooh, do tell. What are your
What's the problems?
I think
Gideon loves
think
doesn't Scotus.
Yeah, we're gonna get really deep here. One of the theological projects that Scotus was involved in was trying to say, how can we say anything intelligible about God? Right? So what does our language mean when we start predicating this of God? And apophatic theology, saying what God isn't, was well established and well accepted at that time. And Thomas Aquinas, who came before Scotus, his theory was that our language is analogous with God. It's an analogy of proper proportion when we say true things about God. So it is true, but it isn't like a perfect representation there. And Lazarus, or Gideon Lazar, he can correct me if he thinks I'm getting any of this wrong. But John Duns Scotus said that's just equivocating right there. It's not a proper. So we need to figure out how we can have proper language about God. And Scotus's theory was that our concept of being could be univocally predicated of God and creatures. So that's just
say that one more time. Uniquely predicated.
Univocally, right? So if I say Jacob is a man, that's a univocal predication. It means exactly what it sounds like it means, right? If I say that, gosh, what's an equivocal predication? If I were to say that Jacob is a man and Superman is a man, that's an equivocal predication. Because one of you is a real human being and the other one's a fictional character.
Okay.
Right? That's actually a garbage example. And if I come up with something better, I'll say this. So when something's univocal, it's applied in the exact same sense to whatever it is you're talking about.
So I could say Shadow is a cat and a lion is a cat, but we mean very different things by cat in those two sentences.
Or even better example would be Shadow is a cat or Andrew is a cat, because Andrew's just lurking there quietly and hasn't said anything yet. That would be pretty equivocal right there. That'd be more analogical. Yeah. That'd be an analogy right there. If I'm remembering Scotus correctly, and we've already got a little disagreement here. This is something that we can disagree about in good faith as Catholics, so not a big deal. And we'd have to have a long conversation because the issues are very nuanced. Scotus, one of his doctrines that I have trouble with is you can equivocate being, you can predicate being univocally at all times, right? Being as such. And the thing is
Like
it's really hard to talk about in
capital
English.
B being?
It's really hard to talk about in English because they were speaking in Latin and they could do things with Latin verbs that were really helpful. So you could do, I'm going to type something in the chats.
Okay.
So here we have 3 different words in Latin that can be usefully translated as being,
Okay.
right? The first one, ens, is a participle,
Okay.
right? So an adjectival verb. The second one is an infinitive, to be or being. And the third one is a noun, essentia. It's kind of like a noun form of being. So, and and once you just learn a little bit of Latin, these words are like nice and crisp, which is why Bishop Barron likes to do that, right? He says ipsum esse subsistens, and he's got that middle word right in there, and it's like, oh, the pure act of to be, okay, or the subsisting to beiness itself, basically. And it works well in Latin if you know a little bit of Latin, but yeah, it's like being is just a really squishy word in English.
So
And
which one of these 3 words did he mean being?
I think I need to study this, and but I think he was using essay when he was talking about univocally predicating being of God and creatures. So the act of to be, it's an infinitive. So yeah, it's hard to talk about in English, but it's crisp in Latin. Um, so so yeah, Scotism. That's what I remember from seminary.
I mean, so in Hebrew, the tetragrammaton is obviously related to the verb to be, and Hebrew doesn't have a present tense of the verb to be. So predication in Hebrew is very different than in other languages. But for me, that makes it very easy to refer to God as capital B being, because in Hebrew, I think that's that is essentially a meaning of the tetragram.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good because that's a Catholic teaching too. That the Almighty One is revealing Himself as ipsum esse subsistens. Unnecessary Latin words all over the conversation.
I don't think it's unnecessary. I am big on using words in other languages when necessary. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's that I think it's all kind of grasping at the same point, and yeah. So anyway, it's not like me and Mr. Gideon Lazar, or however you say that, are gonna like really fight and like excommunicate each other over this. But
That
I
would be
just,
fun though.
yeah, well, yeah.
Well, do you disagree with univocal theology?
So it's yeah, I think golly, I was having this conversation like a month ago. SCOTUS keeps on coming up. I don't know how, but he does.
Somebody might be trying to tell you something, Father Eric.
Yeah, yeah. Like I need to abandon canon law and just study pure ontology from now on.
I don't think your bishop would like that.
No. I don't think my bank account would like it either because, well, the diocese is paying for me to go to canon law school. Catholic University of America is not cheap. Yeah. Yeah, I think the univocal concept of being runs the danger of collapsing the supernatural and the natural together. And the way that that always works out is that the supernatural is now just domesticated and no longer potent. So that's where I think that leads off to. I think the analogy, analogical predication of things of God, um, still gives the tribute to God as the creator. But when you actually read Aquinas on it, it's like, yeah, sorry, I started reading the comments. That was a mistake. Um, the words that we use don't properly meet to God, and even the concepts are actually more dissimilar than they are similar. So,
Well, I mean, what I would say is, even let's say, given you thought that the words were perfect, our conceptions as humans cannot grasp God.
right. And even the very, we call it the mode of predicating, right? Where we could say, blessed be the Lord is my light, right? At that point, at least in English and at least in Latin, I don't know how it works in Hebrew. You're basically compositing God. God is light, putting two things together. And for Aquinas, God is perfectly simple.
Yeah, I don't think I think in the Hebrew Bible, I don't think there's ever anything that I would say is like God is light, but there's definitely places where the word light is used and it's referring to God.
Well, to my understanding, there are. I have heard rabbis lecturing talk about stories in the Talmud where God's anthropomorphized, like God wearing tefillin or something like that.
Well, I mean, Isaiah has anthropomorphic descriptions of God.
Yeah,
That
and
yeah.
my understanding is Jewish theology, generally speaking, is non-univocal, right? You can't analogize between human characteristics and God. At least not the same way that Scotus would say. I could be wrong.
That sounds right to me. So Colonimus on my channel asked a really good question. Colonimus is a Satmar Chassid. You may be one of the very few Roman Catholic priests to actually discuss any sort of theology with an actual Satmar Chassid, because Satmar is the most insular of Jewish things, although obviously Colonimus himself is not. But he says
Other than the Turikatara.
that's we don't talk about Natura Carta. I've never gotten this clearly. If God is the creator of all, what's the difference between natural and supernatural?
Yeah, I'd say anything. No, oh man, here we go. Yeah, I'd say any direct participation in God ends up being supernatural. So, no, here it is. It's right, natus, right? Natus means to be born.
Okay.
That's what it comes from. That's where our word nature comes. It's things that are born out of things. And the way it's used in scholastic theology is this is what's born out of your action, right? You're a human being, you have a human nature, so you're going to do things humanly. We're not like Shadow the cat who's going to do things cattily. We're not like cattle who do things cattily. And so usually the distinction between nature and supernature seems to imply a certain finitude about the thing, that it's one type of thing and not another type of thing. So we've got human beings, we've got different types of angels, different species of angels, And then you would have like God himself, who's not limited to any particular anything. He's contains all perfections in himself, perfectly, simply, all that stuff you can find at the very beginning of the first part of the Summa, or just the first part of the Summa, excuse me. And so, usually, when supernature has been the concept of that has been used, it implies some sort of direct participation in the life of God somehow. So an example of that would be the grace of God that comes to us uh, through the sacraments. That's a direct participation in the light of God. That doesn't come out of my human nature the same way participation in the family, participation in the nation would. That comes from God. Uh, yeah, that's the best answer I can do on a Monday.
I'm not sure I completely understood what you said, but if I did, it sounds very close to how Hasidic philosophy would make a distinction. But so we take very special care of which name of God is used where in the Bible. And what usually gets translated as Lord is the tetragram, and what usually gets translated as God is referred to as Shem Elokut, right? The word Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
And what Hasidus teaches is that those things which emanate from God in a causal manner would be referred to by Shem Elohim, and the ones which sort of break that causal relationship through God's agency and a revelation of godly will from beyond that would not Din and Malchus. You could say Din and Rachamim, right? So that the tetragram represents a direct revelation of God's will outside of causation. And that's why in so many places it says, I am the Lord your God. Ani Havaya Elohim, right? Because ultimately the innovation of Jewish, like Hebrew monotheism, is that these two things are in fact one. And that actually does relate to God 1 and God 2. When Yosef was talking with PVK, right? There is an idea of I am the Lord your God, meaning that it is the same God, it is one God who both reveals himself through the supernatural, meaning outside of normal causation, and the natural, which is normal causation. Does that make any sense?
Maybe it'll make sense if I listen to it again tomorrow.
Mark says thoughts are supernatural in some sense. I think that would be. You're right, but I would say that inspiration can be considered supernatural in a sense. It is inspiration, certainly revelation.
Revelation, yeah. There are acts of the intellect, at least for Aquinas, right? Because Aquinas is my teacher. He's my rabbi. For Aquinas, there are certain acts of the human intellect that actually operate in an angelic mode of, so without having to go through a discursive process, but you just get the flash of insight altogether. But yeah. thoughts not natural solves a lot of problems. Wow. Okay. Good. Mark's having some insights tonight, so you helped him out. Um, that
Okay.
would come from the spiritual. The uh, thoughts would come from the supernatural and immortal part of the human person, the soul. So,
I thought you guys didn't believe in immortal souls.
well, the
Oh,
soul's naturally immortal.
okay. So who was I hearing who was saying that? Oh no, you don't believe it's eternal.
Oh, yeah. Well, so if by eternal you mean no beginning in time,
Right.
then no, no, no. They're created, souls created at the moment of conception.
Okay. We would say at least certain souls, essentially the human soul breathed into Adam. We would say the soul breathed into Adam is eternal.
Huh.
Yeah. Which I understood was not how Christian the Catholic view of soul was.
No,
There,
no,
so
it's
according to Judaism, there aren't new souls that are created after Adam.
There can be new souls created, but there there basically we believe that there is a level of soul which comes from God Himself. It's that is the divine. I
what
guess you could
what
call
word are
it.
you using for soul?
Uh, Neshama would be the one that would be usually referred to in this way.
Neshama. And is that one of those words that has like three or four different translations depending on context?
All of the words for soul in Hebrew do, which there are several of.
Well, to
Yeah.
my understanding, there's
Yeah.
also nefesh, but I don't quite understand the
Yeah,
difference.
nefesh is considered a lower level of soul. Both get translated as soul,
Yeah.
but it says in Genesis it says when he breathed in his nostrils the soul of life. It says v'yapach ba'apav nishmat chaim, if I'm remembering the thing correctly. So yeah, I
See, is
actually
it
have to go
okay?
soon, but you were saying, Father, I am going to turn off the thing on my channel. Everybody go over to Father Eric's, like and subscribe. And
And don't forget to ring the little bell so you know all the times that I'm going live.
exactly. And yeah, you were saying, Father Eric.
Yeah, it's just way simpler in Latin because we just have anima.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's not where some of the confusion comes in. Is we've just got much simpler language in Latin, and so it's like so I've heard some of this stuff about like the different kinds of souls, and I'm just like peeking over the fence, overhearing a conversation meant for somebody else. So I'm not going to pretend like I actually understand what's going on over there in your theology. But it doesn't work if you've got the Latin conception of soul clicking around in your head, basically.
Yeah, so Gideon and I are actually probably going to schedule a discussion on souls because um it's the Jewish concept of soul is obviously very, very different from the Christian's concept of soul. We like 99.9% of Judaism believes in transmigration of souls, which is a fancy word to say it's kind of like reincarnation, but don't think of it like reincarnation. Believes in losing and gaining souls
Yeah.
and fragmentary souls, which all three of those sound very strange from a Christian idea of
Oh
soul.
yeah, yeah.
I've heard of
Because
Go ahead.
yeah. It's the soul is. I mean, the way it functions in Catholic theology is like it's that part that makes all human beings the same, and so like a human nature as such, a human soul as such is abstract. It's only when it becomes incarnate in a particular person that the particularities and the differences emerge there. So there's no like male soul or female soul. All of the results of the very real differences between men and women are downstream of embodiment there.
So
So
we would say all material reality is a reflection of spiritual realities, and therefore the fact that a male or female are so different and in fact that each human being is different is a reflection of differences in their source. Uh, well, ultimately, God is the source of everything, and we do believe in divine simplicity. But within creation, right, where then it is a reflection of our souls that we are different from each other.
yeah, yeah, and it's like Aquinas has got this crazy thing that I don't understand properly, where it's like your soul becomes like tied in with this body and with this flesh, and so even when it's separated with death, it still like carries the imprint and everything that happened in
Mhm.
your life up into heaven. But it's like it's like that comes with embodiment that doesn't come from your soul. The soul receives it, as it were, from the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very interesting. I do have to go. It was very nice talking to you, Father Eric. I will
Yeah.
probably watch at least some of the rest of this later. But yeah, I hopefully I got you a few subscribers.
Well, you got me 30 tonight. It's about double than what I would normally get on a good night. So
Oh, as
30
far as
people, 30 people watching.
views, just be
Yeah.
very careful because I was on Twitter. I put it on Twitter. The Twitter view count is anybody who sees it. It's not necessarily somebody who clicks on
And
it.
plus,
Okay.
how many bots are on Twitter as well?
Yeah. So yeah,
Hey, I'll take the bot views as well.
Does that
okay. I'm
increase
gonna go.
after? Okay, peace. Does the bot do the bot views increase revenue?
I'm not anywhere near being monetized. And I don't know if given the option if I would. I'm worried about YouTube. I'm worried about what it could do to me if I got too into it, which is why I just kind of have a really half effort YouTube channel.
It'll take your soul.
Yeah,
Ooh,
and I like
is
having
this
my soul.
Andrew?
That is Andrew.
Okay,
Both
Yeah.
of you.
your mic is really loud.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah, but both of you have the
That
privilege.
better?
You still here. Let me start messing with your settings here.
Is that better?
That's a little better.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, now it's better.
All right.
Um, so Father Eric, how's your canon law studies going?
It's wrapping up. It's wrapping up. I think I've got finals next week. The teacher decided to just have another class in our Latin class instead of a final, so that'll be super easy. And then it's an oral final for supradiocesan structures. So we'll see how that goes. I've been very very bored in that class, so I might have to do a little bit of cramming to get that ready to go. But
So
then I'll have Christmas break.
yeah, so you seem like you got a plan, and you're gonna graduate soon.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just cooking along the normal curriculum. I've got two summers down in Washington D.C. and two more to go. So
I don't.
yeah,
Maybe it's a common accent, but for some reason your voice kind of sounds like a is reminding me of I watched a movie with I think it was like a Mickey Mouse Christmas movie when I was young, and there was somebody in there who had a voice similar to yours.
was it like Goofy or
Yeah,
Donald Duck or
I think it was Goofy or something like that. Or
Gorsh? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Some of those, some of my vowels do end up in the back of the throat. I don't know where that comes from, especially when I say hour. It's really, really far back there.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I hope the best. And so when you do canon law, so you're gonna be a judge on a court with how many other people?
So the court is convened for every individual case that's brought before the tribunal. And looking at the way things are running in my diocese right now, there'll be a pool of 4 judges consistently chosen from, and we'll just kind of rotate who's in and who's out on each case. And then also, the most of the cases we make use of an auditor, who can also be a judge. And they're the ones who actually go out and conduct the depositions and go around and gather cases. And the reason for that is we have a full-time layman who works as a canon lawyer, um, and we like putting him to work doing some of this legwork for the tribunal because it doesn't take a priest away from a parish. So all of our canon lawyer priests are also in parishes, which is a nice thought. And then there'll be other court officers, but we don't need to get into too much detail.
Yeah.
Basically, the only thing I'll be judging in most days is just marriage cases. We technically, on paper, can judge all sorts of cases.
But
I'm kind of
practically
hoping
speaking,
to not have to discipline any priests for a penal crime. Like it'd be better if I didn't have to do that. So
yeah, but practically speaking, like 90% or something like that was going to be marriage cases.
yeah, yeah. And then the other 10% will be cool canon law stuff as it comes up. Like today, I got a phone call from our chancellor, the layman who works for the diocese. And he just wanted like a sanity check on um, what had happened was a priest while he was trying to celebrate mass. There's kind of 2 common vessels you'll see celebrating during mass. You'll have a chalice, which is a cup that holds the wine, and you'll have a ciborium. And certain ciboriums have a tall stem with a node in the middle and a large bowl that kind of looks like a chalice. And so I don't know how the priest managed this, but apparently when he was going to consecrate the wine, he picked up a ciborium full of hosts rather than the chalice and said the prayers over that. And so the chancellor called to consult me just to get a second opinion on it. We both agreed that it was a valid mass, but he shouldn't do that because he still had the intention to celebrate mass the correct way. He just, in his distraction or tiredness or whatever, grabbed the rum in, but the wine was still on the altar. So every once in a while, I might get to do a fun and interesting question like
Yeah.
that. At least I thought it was fun and interesting. Maybe I don't know how the chat feels about that.
I mean, fair enough. I'm sure it's something interesting for you. That kind of stuff is not particularly interesting for me. But yeah. I mean, so sounds like you got a good plan for your career, and I mean, I hope the best. And
Well, that's the easy
I
thing about being a priest is that you don't have the plan for your career. The bishop does.
but I
Yes.
think, and this is more of a broader sociological thing. You are going to see. I don't know if you're going to see like a specifically Catholic revival, but I do think amongst young people, Christianity is becoming more popular than it used
Yeah,
to.
and we're benefiting from that. Here at the so during Holy Week, I'm in charge of all the liturgies here, so I get to hear all the liturgies here at the cathedral in Fargo, and part of the Holy Week liturgies includes bringing people into the Catholic Church. It's the typical time for doing it. There could be flexibility in other cases. You don't have to do it necessarily on Easter. And we've got 27 people that we're either bringing into the church from another Protestant denomination or baptizing them because they haven't been baptized yet. And there might be a few who just didn't get confirmed. and we're completing their Christian initiation at that time. So
Yeah.
27 at a parish the size of the cathedral, which, to be fair, also includes the student chapel. Um, they do their initiation here. That's pretty good. And then at the parish that my dad works at, they actually have two tracks of Christian initiation. One that brings people in at Christ the King, and another that brings people in at Easter. And he's in charge of that. He runs the OCIA program there. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So
I guess and I don't think it's unique to your just I don't think it's unique to any sort of parish or any sort of part of the country. I think, and I mean, I don't want to say it's a global phenomenon, but I think at least in America, you are starting to see. I don't know if it's again. I don't think it's necessarily a Catholic revival in specific, but certainly a Christian revival. I mean, yeah, a lot of Protestantism, a lot of Eastern Orthodox, but Catholics also have that. And
yeah, it's
I
yeah.
don't know
We'll hope for
I
good
don't know if
things.
I mean, I don't know what the main cause of it is. Maybe, I mean, perhaps, and I don't know how you would respond to this. Perhaps a lot of the Christian revival is politically motivated.
It's possible. I mean, people do all sorts of things for all sorts of motivations here. I mean, just kind of looking over the trajectory of history and what we've experienced, say, since 2014 when the world ended, is just
2014?
the world ended in 2014. The Mayans were off by 2 years.
Wait, why do you say 2014?
Mark from Navigating Patterns can actually explain that a lot better than I can, but
Well, just explain it to the best of your ability.
um, that's when something that you could start to see in 2014 is a lot of the cracks in the traditional media, right? So like all of these TV shows, like all these news programs, all of these media outlets that were considered established and reputable, those are sense making things. Those are meaning making things. Those are people to go to get the story and the understanding of all sorts of those things. And when you see, especially among young men, is you got like kind of the Gamergate scandals in 2014, 2016 era. I wasn't all that plugged into it, and a lot of people at that time began to say, "Wait a minute, these people aren't telling the truth, and we've got the receipts for it." These media companies had basically been the primary, they don't have to be the only ones, but like the primary respectable ones for how people made sense of the world around them. Um,
And so basically, you had a shift away from, you could say, centralization of media narratives to, you could say, new media or independent media.
mhm. And at that point, the people who had, for good or for ill, the responsibility for maintaining order aren't able to maintain order the way that they had effectively done, even if it wasn't a just order or subservient to the truth or any of those sorts of things. It was still an order, right? A order of the world, the way things that would work and people could make sense of things. And so it's no surprise that you get very shortly after all of this, Donald Trump has space to run for president, where I don't think he could have done that in 2012 or 2008. Like the establishment would have been able to keep him out.
Yeah, and I think so. I think there's two things to say that. On the one hand, it's mostly good. The only problem with that is there are people who are black propagandists in alternative media, and
Mhm,
black propaganda in alternative media is harder to weed out when people don't trust the mainstream media. So in a
mhm.
sense, it's like 90% positive in that I'm glad to see the corruption in the establishment be called out, but the 10% of the problem is that all
Yeah,
the black propagandists like Fuentes and even some of the people who've been going on Tucker Carlson recently, like Candace Owens, who are basically black propagandists in alt media.
Yeah, yeah, and so when I talk about the world ending, it's like that's kind of an apocalyptic thing, you know, like the biblical wisdom we look to at these times is that it's starting to rain and there's going to be a flood, right? Another place of biblical wisdom you could look to is like the book of Revelation, and we've got all of these strange monsters coming out everywhere. So we don't look at this and just say, "Oh, this is good," right? Because any event, any kind of world convulsion like this, uh, that is this big, isn't just going to be good. It requires, discernment and careful deliberation to find out um, where the good is and to separate the wheat from the chaff. And when you're in the middle of it, it's not necessarily obvious what's that is. So when I say the world ends, it means like, yeah, and like hold on because things are probably going to get worse before they get better, right? Because like we want to, and this is a perennial temptation, we want to like crystallize things into moments, say, okay, 2014 the world ended, and then immediately afterwards a new world came in and took its place, and there
No,
wasn't any
you can't do that.
chaotic, yeah, and there wasn't
Things
any of
don't
this
change
chaotic
like
time.
that. Things change in I don't want to say a conservative manner because not just conservative. Like things change in a way that is not instantaneous. I mean, there's very few examples of like sudden paradigm shifts which rock everything upside down. I'm not saying that there are events that are approach that, but there's nothing which gets to that level,
Mhm.
really.
Yeah, yeah, and if you divide time up into small enough pieces, eventually you'll find um, some kind of duration. I think so. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say the world ended in 2014, and that we're the birth pangs of another world. Is this going to be the big one where Jesus shows up? Is this just going to be another one of the small ones? That's way above my pay grade. But that things are falling apart right now, I think, is obvious to anybody who wishes to see it.
I mean, listen, I hope, and I don't want to get too political, but I hope Trump has the you know, the balls of steel, and Trump can bring some sort of semblance of justice to, you know, people who have been abusing the American system. But what this means in some sort of like grand scale and some sort of cosmic metaphysical thing, again, well above my pay grade.
Yep. And it would be good if there was more justice. And if the president elect is the one to bring that about, thanks be to God. And if not, then we'll just keep praying. Alrighty. I uh, know that this is a shorter stream than normal, but I have to go to work tomorrow, and it's been dark for hours now. And rational creatures at this time will go to bed. So I appreciate Andrew, you lurking a little bit. I appreciate your questions, Kirk. I appreciate Jacob for rating my stream. I think that's the word you use for that, right? He rated my stream. Um,
You're welcome,
so
Father. For my fifth word in the stream, I'd like to say good night.
good
Good
night.
night. Okay.
Good night, and God bless you all.
So you guys, so wait, just one more thing. So you do weekly Monday streams?
Yep. And we were late this week, and I thought it was going to be 15 minutes late. It ended up being an hour late. Usually we just go 2 hours.
Okay. So I'll see. I guess I'll try and see you next Monday. And have you ever talked to Jacob about Christian versus Jewish stuff?
A little bit here and there, not like one big. Jacob's been very generous with me. All right. I guess we're doing one more topic before we shut it down. But Jacob's been very generous with me and like just giving me a platform to talk about Catholic stuff. And you can find my videos with him on there. So on his channel. So he seems to be quite fond of Catholics for some reason. And
I mean,
I'll take
listen,
it with
Jacob is not anti-Christianity. He is
right.
critical, or I mean, again, I think most Orthodox Jews, there's obviously theological differences, but like your average Christian is uh, better than most. But I think it would be interesting to see if you and Jacob ever sat down and discuss like how do you guys interpret biblical passages about the Messiah and about the Trinity different. But
It'd
I
be
don't know if
very
that'll ever
interesting.
happen.
That would be very interesting. All righty. Now we're going to end the stream. Good night.
Night.
God bless you all.
Right.